Thank you very much. So big thanks to Northeastern Photography Network for having me here today to talk at this brilliant, timely event with such a great diversity of speakers and artists. I'll just get my presentation up. Hopefully there won't be too much overlap between mine and Ed's, but there are a few areas of his that I'm going to kind of readdress, hopefully with a bit more slightly different perspective or a bit of kind of new information. So who am I and why am I here today? Well, I guess I'm someone who cares and someone who takes action. I'm a doer, a dot connector, but also a nurturer, a listener, a plant lover, a dustbin diver, a slow eater, and a fresh air dreamer. I'm a maker, a creator, a curious potion shaper, and I'm here to share. I'll start by sharing some of my work over the past few years, and then I'll talk a bit about the Sustainable Darkroom and what we've been up to with that. So in my work, I've always taken a hands-on materials-based approach. I'm fascinated by the way that chemicals react and images can form. Working within the photographic medium, but moving across the border of many other practices and disciplines, I'm drawn into the physicality of the analog medium, the physical manipulations and reactions that take place. Often within my work, I'll focus on a specific material at a time, and I've worked across materials including rust, mushrooms, algae, wood, roots, and soil. I find this approach of restricting myself incredibly stimulating. With limitations, we adapt. We begin to think in a different way, creating new paths and laying down new networks for ideas to form. The first project I began working in this way was in 2015 with mushrooms. Mushrooms are neither plant nor animal, but somewhere in between. This unique property, which allows them to be used for all sorts of things, from an environmentally friendly alternative to plastic, medicinal healing, cleaning up oil spills, breaking down dangerous gases, and potentially new research into their potential as a color photographic developer. So I began going out on walks around parks and woodlands, searching for these mystical, not plant, not animal beings, and recording my findings very simply using color and black and white photograms, placing the mushrooms directly onto the paper in the darkroom, or using them as a kind of photographic stamp, recording the shapes of the gills. I'm interested in the life of this material after I'd removed it from its natural habitat, this material being the mushroom. So I allowed these mushrooms to soak in the chemicals and then to decompose on the sheets of paper that I was working with. This decomposition and reaction between the mushroom and the photographic paper would last for anywhere from 4 to 14 days. I found that as the mushroom decomposed, the fluids interacted with the development and the reactions on the paper. So on the screen, we see the rich golden brown tones are forming as the chemistry of the mushroom's decomposition is reacting with the surface of the paper. This was kind of a very early realization that natural materials and products could also have an effect in the way that kind of photographs are made and potentially developed. So since during this research into mushrooms, I discovered that it was also possible to make paper with a certain class of mushroom. So for me, the next logical step was to encase this visual documentation of mushrooms that I had created within mushrooms themselves. So on the screen, we can see the outcome, which is a hand-bound book of original one-off cameraless photographic prints covered with this handmade mushroom paper. And the studio very much smelled of mushroom soup or something similar when I was making it. I got quite a few comments. So since this first encounter with the subject matter also becoming my tool as well as the physical material of the work, I went on to create a body of work about algae. incorporating the material again into the process of creating and making. Using it directly on the surface of the paper in the colour darkroom, or mixing it with chemicals to form crystals, using it as a dye or toner to dye fibre-based photographic prints, or growing it as mould on fibre-based prints. Similarly to the mushrooms, algae became the integral element of the work. So all of my work is unique, and I scan it for my own record, but I never usually reproduce work from a scan. The surface of my work has so much texture and life to it that would be lost to reproduction. Everything exists as a unique original piece, and I also choose to not conventionally fix a lot of my prints, as not only I have issues with the toxicity of the so also find this can often flatten the tones and kill the sort of life or spirit of the print. This means that the print remains slightly unstable, and in different exposures of strong sunlight and humidity, the tones slightly change and morph. I see this as part of the nature and the beauty of the print. It is no longer a flat, sterile surface, but a living, breathing object that I hope people enjoy sharing a space with. This kind of alternative understanding of what objects can be and their kind of thingness is a way of kind of thinking and working that I think is kind of one of the elements that we're tackling with the Sustainable Darkroom. So other projects include works with tree and plant roots. This project in which I was subjugating plants to photographic chemicals to try and understand what, if any, of the photographic material can be processed, aiming to somehow visualize the unobserved and unseen cognitive proficiency of the roots. In the late 1800s, Charles Darwin was the first to suggest that the tip of the roots in plants is akin to the brain of some animals. Since then, the possibility of mental capacities and cognitive abilities of plants has become an exciting field of research. In his book, The Hidden Life of Trees, Peter Willeben states that the roots of a tree is where the equivalent of a brain is located. The root network is in control of all chemical activity in the plant. They absorb and release essential substances. Another material I've been working with is rust. These works are all made by placing iron-based objects directly onto photographic surfaces, or mark making with oxidized iron solutions. The blue works also incorporate cyanotype-coated surfaces, and cyanotype chemistry is an iron-based photographic process using iron salts. So making this work, I've been researching the sustainability of the silver industry and how our photographic landscape could take form without it potentially. Silver is a key element in analog photography, and it's suspended into an emulsion or gelatin to create a fine, light-sensitive layer. When exposed to light, a reduction oxidization reaction takes place, otherwise known as a redox reaction. This causes the silver to blacken once in contact with development components. However, silver is a limited resource on our Earth. It's in short supply and all grades continue to reduce. I personally have concerns about the scarcity of silver and have consequently been thinking about the possibility of producing photographic images with other metals that also change color when they go through a redox reaction. Iron is one of these metals. Iron is the fourth most common element in the Earth's crust and can be fully recycled to produce a new form of the same quality and integrity as the product it's been recycled from, making it a very sustainable element to work with. So when iron goes through a reduction oxidization reaction, it produces red rust, a sight which we're quite familiar with. So this series of works have all been produced incorporating this reaction of iron into rust, raising the suggestion that if we want photography to have a more sustainable future, then the future of photography might look quite different from the black and white analog imagery we know now and have associated with since the 1800s. Perhaps the future of photography will be tones of orange, red, brown, white, or even other colors from other metals that we haven't looked into yet. At present, this work very much exists just as a material exploration rather than a scientific study. So then, more recently, I've been working with clay. These works have all been made using clay dug from a couple of different sites around the UK and then filtered through old curtains, pillowcases, or any other suitable scrap material that I can get my hands on. Different sites produce clay of varying chemical composition and mineral content. Each deposit of clay producing a different reaction with the photographic surface, forming tones, textures, and hues unique to its own body. An interaction of clay on the surface of silver gelatin paper forms an imprint. These imprints and recordings are then washed off before I develop them or fix them using homemade plant developers and salt-based fixers. These organic lines, cracks, and crevices visible in these images are from where the clay is spread, flowed, dried, and cracked, allowing light to hit the paper in different intensities. So the plant-based photographic chemicals that I make and use to develop and fix the work are made in response to the toxicity of the commercial photographic chemistry. Depending on the variation of their encounter with the salt-based fixer, some prints are more stable than others. Variations in light and humidity are also likely to give rise to new tones and unobserved details in the prints as they age. A very recent piece of work that I made for this year's Format Festival, actually this is a film which I'll just play. I'll talk over it because the noise is the noise of the sun recorded by NASA. So for this year's Format Festival, I chose to use this technique to chart the effect that changes to the dilution of commercial sodium thiosulfate hardening fixative and time in the chemistry bath had on the final stability of the image. The film here that I'm showing shows the work in the first 12 hours of light straight after it was made. As they were made, I put each one directly into a dark bag to reduce any further exposure. So the time period in which most change took place was in these first 12 hours. The work is now framed behind UV glass, so the shift to those unfixed prints has further slowed. So you're probably wondering what each print is and kind of what's the relevant. Essentially, the prints increase in dilution from left to right. I'm going to pause it there because it's a bit noisy. The prints increase in dilution from left to right, as we see here, and decrease in time from top to bottom, meaning that top left corner here has been fixed at a ratio of 1:4, 1 part fixer, 4 parts water, for 128 minutes. And the print on the bottom right, down here, has been fixed at a ratio, oh, I didn't mean to go there. Has been fixed at a ratio of 1:128, so that's 1 part fixer to 128 parts water, for a time of half a second. Half a minute. So the top left is incredibly stable, if you like, and the bottom right is incredibly unstable. But what's interesting is even those ones fixed at a ratio of 1:128 up here still show some form of stability. So this makes us question, if we work within different parameters, different timescales at a slower pace, for example, then perhaps we can reduce our need for such strong chemicals and reevaluate our kind of chemical usage in the darkroom. All of this kind of questioning and research from my projects and my personal work feeds directly into my work and my setting up of the Sustainable Darkroom. So Ed's already kind of touched on what the Sustainable Darkroom is. It's an initiative that I founded in 2019 because I had all these questions and ideas flying around in my head, but not enough support, knowledge, or resources to actually try and realize them. So in June 2019, during initial small residency that I put together, this kind of loose organizational structure began finding its feet. Generously hosted by XYZ Books, I gathered a small group of 6 artists around tables in basements to ask ourselves the question, what do we mean by a sustainable darkroom practice and what could it look like? The Sustainable Darkroom has now grown into an international project, bringing together practitioners, researchers, scientists, and experts from all parts of the globe. It is designed to educate, to learn through sharing and collaborative research, to encourage mistakes to be made and crazy ideas and ideals to be tested. With each new residency, workshop, talk, or event, we get a little bit closer to understanding this word sustainable and the role that it plays in every aspect of the photographic industry and beyond. I recognize that we still have a very long way to go, and a lot of the ideas, recipes, and suggestions are not yet rigorously tested or scrutinized. This initiative, as Ed stated, is kind of open for all to be involved with, all to learn from, all to add to, and all to question. We will continue to experiment and adapt as we learn, because the project is designed to build collective power within and opposing the current photographic industry. I want to encourage and empower you as makers, as thinkers, and as doers to have the knowledge and awareness of the materials and processes you are using, to understand the relationship between the things you use and the planet you live on. So we've written a manifesto which is currently available to read on londonartphoto.com under the Sustainable Darkroom section. This was collaboratively written between myself, Ed Carr, along with Eileen White and Alice Kazanav, who are also helping us in developing the Sustainable Darkroom. I encourage you to go and have a read of that if you wish to kind of find out a bit more. So I was going to say some of you might be wondering what the issues are with analog photography or even photography as a whole in relation to our ecology and the impact we have on the earth. But I think that Ed covered that pretty clearly, and you probably are all now very much aware of our kind of role within the photographic industry and the impact that this has and its contribution to our global ecological crisis. No industry is exempt from negatively contributing to this crisis. And photography, though it's not the bottom of the pile, it's certainly no golden angel when it comes to its contribution. Ed talked about kind of gelatin and other things, but there are so many avenues that we can consider and explore. Have you thought about how much water is used to wash one black and white film, for example? If you wash for Ilford's recommended time of 10 minutes, but I know a number of practitioners wash for twice this, 20 minutes, or even some that wash their films for half an hour. But at just a recommended washing time of 10 minutes, with an average of 6 litres of water coming out of a tap per minute, then the average person will waste 60 litres of fresh water per black and white film. That's enough water for a family of 4 to drink for over 1 week. There are so many other facts and figures that we could calculate without too much thought or effort, but really we don't want to bog you down with these facts and make you hate the photographic industry. Or kind of stop taking photographs or working with certain practices which are important to the way you work. I want to celebrate and support the industry. It's a way of working that's incredibly important to me, and demonizing this doesn't resolve anything or get us anywhere. So last April, I devised 4 micro-residencies which Ed was in one of them, in the remove one, and he's already kind of covered these 4 bases a bit. But I was asked to go into a bit more detail on each of them. So I'll do that now for the final part of my talk. So splitting into the themes, remove, rework, recycle, and repurpose, these can be used as ways of thinking through motions, materials, and systems within the darkroom, and collectively throughout the week, the residencies work towards potential solutions and alternative ways of looking. So how can we practically begin to address these issues and thoughts within photography and within the industry? And how can the Sustainable Darkroom help in terms of this philosophy and ethos that Ed drawn on? So remove, this could be the removal of harmful elements within photographic development and in future production. For example, the use of plant-based chemicals, salt water for fixative, or finding plant-based alternatives to gelatin. I've been researching the possibility of using kombucha scobies, a byproduct of brewing kombucha, as an alternative to plastics and gelatin. With some help from Alice Kaznav, Helena Doyle, and Micah Baum, some of this research and work will be on show at the exhibition What on Earth, which is opening next Thursday, 1st of July, if any of you are in London, at the Couple Project's Piccadilly Gallery. So I was saying my light that is currently exposing my very large kombucha SCOBY is being powered by a battery box, which I have charged from solar panels, which are on the roof of my camper van that I am currently working on. So all of the energy that I'm using to expose my large SCOBY print is all solar, which is quite fun. So then we also have thinking about how we could potentially remove things like resin from resin-coated papers. You know, resin is a layer of plastic which comes in the majority of papers we use, and it's there to increase the processing time and enable us to use processing machines and various other kind of progressions within the darkroom. But when working with this paper, we need to be aware that the resin makes it unable to be recycled because of this kind of bind between the plastic and the paper. We could also, if materials such as kombucha SCOBY that I'm currently researching are more, show themselves to kind of have material potential, then we could think about how we can transform these to fit into more conventional film structures and into the back of cameras. This is an example of one of my kombucha SCOBYs, which is coated with cyanotite chemistry. This was made by Alice Kaznav and myself. And there's another one. So the material is incredibly thin and delicate, almost like tissue paper, but at the same time, it's very strong. It can be dampened and kind of re-wetted, re-manipulated, re-dried without changing the kind of form of it, much like you could re-wash a darkroom print if it's not washed properly. So then we have rework. Rework could be reworking the overall culture and the industry of photography and how we approach our materials and our systems and our way of working. Thinking about the water systems or the waste disposal, methods of practicing such as circular systems that Ed already talked about, as well as devising kind of methods that circumvent our need and our reliance on technical equipment. This very much then brings us back to creating a space with room for everyone and everything. So ideas of how we could kind of internalize our impact on film and ecosystems, and making it into a more regenerative and process based around some of the principles used in things like permaculture. We could look at something like using hyperaccumulating plants or even hydroponic water systems to utilize wastewater from the darkroom, or the hyperaccumulation of plants to absorb silver from our wastewater. What if we could plant a garden next to our darkroom and feed it the waste chemicals from our developing, and then reharvest the silver from the roots and shoots and leaves? Into kind of the idea of reworking, I just wanted to reiterate that reworking is also a way of thinking, and it's a way of approaching our practice and our whole understanding of our positioning within our ecosystem. Sustainability should not be thought of as a thing separate to who we are and what we're doing, but an integral part of everything we are and everything we do. Just as someone very nicely and eloquently put in the chat, I'm just going to find it now. Oh, there's lots of questions now. Joe Howell said we need to we compartmentalize a lot as humans. We definitely need a philosophical overhaul to really act in a more holistic and considerate way. Joe's very much got this idea that I'm drawing upon here. How can we think about and incorporate this form of thinking and this ethos into our materials, our theory, our process, our research, and our practice without it being separate? So this is a form of kind of circular, if you want, economy or system or map of what a studio or a darkroom might look like for me. So we have the lab, the studio in the central area. Into this we have rainwater collected from the atmosphere, sunlight from the sun. We've got food coming into it for the kitchen to fuel the people working there. From the kind of burning of wood, potentially on the barbecue or the fire, we can then make potash, which goes into making plant-based developers. We can collect and harvest salt from the sea, which goes into fixing our prints. And we can extract phenols from our plants in the garden to go again into our plant-based developers. And then we have recycle. So recycle in a very broad term, not just in the way of putting things in your recycling bin and hoping that someone else is going to deal with the problem for you, but really thinking about how we can give things a new life, and materials that we're not using or that we see as waste materials, can these become valuable and active materials for another industry or another individual? For example, as Ed mentioned, reclaiming silver from fixer for the utilization of kind of jewelry or other metallurgic applications. Also, can we think about finding new ways to recycle resin-coated papers, film canisters, or pots? In this residency, we had a couple of people who were attempting to recycle in a way their own waste resin-coated papers to form a new material and something valuable and relevant within their work. So these are some examples of some kind of resin-coated paper sculptures. So made by making a paper clay out of the kind of waste resin-coated photographic prints, along with very simple materials such as vinegar, corn flour, and oil. So this is Diego Valenti's sculptures using it, and we had a couple of other people working with it in a similar way. And then lastly, we have repurpose. So this could be the constant upkeep and management of old cameras and technology, thinking about how we value the tools that we use and extend the life of our apparatus. It can also be the utilization of new materials in new and alternative ways, such as kind of anthotypes made from plants and flowers or even vegetable scraps. Can you combine what you're making for dinner with what goes into your photographic making? Can your own waste products within your home become a site of creativity for your photographic productions? As well as kind of remaking pinhole cameras, as Ed touched on, and repurposing old prints, test strips, damaged materials into new constructions, creation, and sites of work. So a couple of examples of some pinhole cameras that were made on the repurpose residency: an unwanted, unloved aubergine by Emily Rudge, and some tins by Sean Roy Barker. And then also, this is some of Nettie Edwards' work that she did during the residency, going through archives and materials kind of from old loved ones. These were her aunt's belongings that were kind of kept and hoarded after her death. And Nettie, during the residency, decided to kind of re-energize these and reactivate them by printing anthotypes onto them, and then using other essentially like bits and bobs that were saved by her aunt and collected by her aunt to then expose those anthotypes. And that was the end of my presentation.